Welcome to the Thames Valley Cancer Alliance Health and Wellbeing series. At the Cancer Alliance, we work with colleagues across the Thames Valley covering Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Oxfordshire and parts of Wiltshire. Our sessions are developed and delivered by health and wellbeing professionals from NHS trusts and wider providers across the Thames Valley region. Today I'm joined by Ellie Lewis from the Here for Health team at the Oxford University Hospitals, and she's going to talk about how you can start getting more active. She'll be introducing the idea of using SMART goals and give you an insight into how habits form. These sessions are for you. We want to bring you information that helps you to live with a cancer diagnosis. We hope this information is also helpful for friends and family who may be supporting someone living with and beyond cancer. So if you find this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to our channel so that we can bring you the latest in our series. We'd love you to leave us a comment to let us know what you think. Ellie, over to you. Please introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Hi, I'm Ellie, the Macmillan Health Promotion Support Worker at the Oxford University Hospitals. I'm going to be talking to you today about boosting our activity levels through tiny goals and habits.
So Ellie, set the scene for us. Give us an overview of what counts as physical activity, how much is the right amount, how much is enough?
Physical activity is moving your body in any way that you can or a way that you enjoy. So as we can see here, we've got the current physical activity guidelines, and they're quite general and won't necessarily be specific for you, but we can see that it's split into sort of the timing that we should aim for, and it's almost like a bit of a gold standard. So we've got 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week, or if you prefer, 75 minutes of vigorous intensity per week. So depending on your ability and what you feel comfortable with, that's sort of the level that we should be aiming for. And within that, we can add in strengthening activities, but also improving our balance. And that can be more important as we get a bit older, because that can, as it says there, reduce the chance of frailty and falls. So thinking about moderate intensity activity is probably where most of us would sit when we think of being active. And obviously that includes things like walking, swimming and cycling. So there are things that we might even do throughout the day without noticing that we're being active. Whereas if you're doing vigorous activity, you tend to be quite aware of it because you might be very out of breath, you might have, difficulty in holding a conversation, and it tends to be what people think of as classic physical activity, so sport, running, running up the stairs, or stairmaster if you're at the gym. So these are the different sort of classic ideas, but obviously physical activity can also be things that we don't necessarily think about. So chores around the house, gardening, all of these things can combine because it's about reducing our sedentary time. So we can see in the bottom left there that actually, if we're unsure about timings and we're unsure of how to be more active, if we just aim to reduce the time that we're sat down, that can actually be a huge step forward in improving our activity levels, especially if we're working from home, if you have an office job, even just driving and commuting, all of these things add up, and actually we don't spend that much time standing. And obviously that won't be relevant for everybody. There may be people which live life in a wheelchair, and in that case there will be other activity that you can do in terms of using your upper body, but that is obviously more personal to yourself and would be something to discuss with your healthcare professionals if you were interested in increasing movement. And I think looking at these pictures, we can sometimes feel like we're not doing enough, or we're not doing enough of the right stuff. Sometimes we don't see walking as being active, but actually every movement matters. So you might be, walking on the spot when you're making a cup of tea, going up on your tiptoes when you're brushing your teeth. Everything counts into making, your activity increase throughout the day. And as I mentioned, it can sometimes make us feel like we're not doing enough, but actually use this as an opportunity to think about what you do. Because I quite often just think of day to day, I've done a quick 10-minute walk to the shop today, but actually looking across the week, I went on a longer walk on the weekend, so I might be closer to my 150 minutes. And just reflecting and thinking about where we are can offer us a bit of an opportunity to see if we might want to make some changes. Some people watching might feel that they currently do a lot of activity and they're really pleased with that. So for them, it might just be a case of maintaining it, whereas you may be watching and coming out of treatment and feel like it's something you really want to work on. And this is a really good place to start in terms of thinking about what might be next for you.
Can you talk a little bit about why increasing that activity is so important? Maybe touch on some of the reasons it might be harder?
Currently, the growing evidence shows us that having a healthy diet, being a healthy weight, and being physically active can reduce your risk of getting cancer again, but can also contribute to an improved quality of life and your long-term health. Now, I'm not going to focus on specifics, as those that are watching may all be at different points in their journey, but I really just want to take a moment to focus on the impact that cancer can have on our ability to move our bodies. So many people will find that their ability to move their bodies in the way that they did before may have changed, and sometimes it can be quite a dramatic change, and it can be for so many different reasons. So physically, you may be dealing with nausea, dizziness, you may have lots of pain post-treatment, or you may be adapting to moving your body following a major surgery or amputation, loss of a body part. Your body may look and feel very different to how it did previously. And obviously that's just the physical ways our bodies are impacted. We haven't even thought about the emotional impact. So, a potential decrease in our confidence, feeling low in our mood, feeling lonely, potentially feeling quite fatigued and quite drained. So altogether, these things are going to impact the way that we move our bodies and how able we feel to do that. So just as a starting point, it's important to think that exercise doesn't have to be extremely strenuous and tiring. You can start gently and build up the amount of physical activity that you do. Recovery is a very gradual process in all aspects, and some days you are going to feel better than others. Even hour to hour, it can change. And you're going to need time to build up your physical strength, as your bodies will go through a huge amount as you go through that cancer journey. So if you do wish to return to exercise, but you're not sure how, or there's something that you are really concerned about, I would suggest speaking with your healthcare professional locally so that they can offer you the appropriate support. So that might be a GP, a physio, or your CNS, because it might be that actually there's something that's holding you back that they need to support you with, or potentially help you create a bit of a plan to deal with.
Many of our viewers will know some of these. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits that come from getting more active?
There are so many different benefits, and there's almost the ones that we always think about and the ones that we expect, but there'll also be lots of personal benefits that people will find as they go through that journey of increasing their activity. But the sort of standard ones are that it will improve your sleep, so the quality of your sleep, it will help you maintain a healthy weight, helps to manage stress, and just improve the general quality of life. And we also think about long-term health as well, after treatment or, following a diagnosis. It also can reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, mental health conditions, and also that risk of cancer returning and future cancers as well. And that movement and the different kinds that we sort of touched on at the start can also support conditions related to your muscles and your bones. So, just increasing your strength over time is going to have benefits to quite literally every part of your body. And I think that's why it's such a good place to start if you're unsure. Anything you do, any movement is going to get at least some of these benefits. And I think that's a really good way to look at it, because if you kind of think, oh, if I just spend a little bit less time down throughout the day, or, I park further away from the supermarket and walk in every time I go, and that's going to help me feel, sleep better, have, feel like I'm managing my stress better, all of these different things, it makes it a little bit more appealing. So there's lots of different benefits, but as I said, you will also find out as you go through that you might find, that increase of confidence because, your jeans might feel like they fit better, or, being out and socializing, all of these different things are going to make it feel like it's actually quite enjoyable, which some people would never think.
How can and should people get started? Exercise can feel like a hard thing to start sometimes.
Firstly, when we are approaching activity from a place of self-care rather than from punishment, it can feel much more enjoyable. So quite often when we think of physical activity, we think, oh, I've got to get up, I've got to either go to the gym, I've got to go on a run and it's raining, I don't want to, but I have to. So focusing our attention on how movement makes us feel. So, higher energy levels, sleeping better, mood, all of those things that we've just spoken about, it can actually make us feel a little bit more empowered to continue with it instead of dreading it every day. So it sort of shifts that self-talk from what do I have to do, what should I do, to what do I get to do today. And that's also why it's so important to pick activity that you enjoy. It doesn't have to be boring and difficult. It's just, another part of your day which is positive. So before we think about how we will become more active, it can be really worthwhile exploring the motivations and reasons we have for becoming active and thinking about how we can successfully build activity into our day-to-day life. So trying to keep it as easy as possible and, fitting it in means that we're much more likely to do it. If we have a gym, which is a 40-minute drive away from our house, what are the chances that you're going to want to do that at the end of a really long day? It's quite small. So we're just going to go through in a bit of an example now, which I will keep referring back to. But for you, you might just want to reflect personally on a goal that you may already have. So I have, for example, spoken with a patient who has motivation around family. So for them, they really want to spend more time being active with their daughter and their grandchild and be as present within that time as possible. So what we've done there is we've identified what's really important for somebody and where their value sits. So now that we've established that, it's all about building a personal goal, which is really specific and relatable and helps them get more of that value in their life. So when we follow a framework and really take the time to consider our goals, we feel much more confident in following them. So instead of just thinking, I'm going to be active every day, and then you wake up in the morning and you've got no idea where to start, if you have a real structure and an idea of how to do that, you're much more likely to be successful. So we're going to use SMART goals, which is an excellent way of doing it. And it is probably something that we're all quite familiar with in terms of something we use at work, but actually the same principles apply. And it's a really good way of, measuring our goals. So the original goal was identified as the patient wanting to return to their weekly walks with their daughter and grandchild to get that special time together. So that motivation that they'd had. So to do that, they've set a SMART goal of planning to increase their daily walking duration by 5 minutes every 3 weeks, and that will build their tolerance to activity, and they'll also measure that using a timer on their phone or their watch. And the end goal will be that they join their daughter and grandchild for a full 40-minute lap that they had done previously by the start of the new year. So what we've got there is a goal that reaches all of these points. So it's specific. So we can see there every 3 weeks, she's going to increase that duration for 5 minutes. So we know that what point the goal is going to change and increase. It's measurable. So it's very easy to turn, check your watch or use your phone to have that 5-minute increase when she's ready. It's achievable and it's realistic. If we push ourselves, it's much too difficult. So giving 3 weeks to slowly increase that tolerance to that extra 5 minutes means that eventually you're ready for the next step up. And it might change. It might be that actually they find that 2 weeks is better, and that's okay because it's all about being flexible within your goal. It's relevant, so it's going to help them achieve that motivation they previously had of spending that lovely time with their daughter and granddaughter and taking that 40-minute walk that they'd previously done. And also they've got a realistic deadline, so they can see in the future when that's going to happen. It's not 4 years away, which would mean that we would likely lose motivation or forget about it. It's soon enough and it has regular intervals, and it kind of means that it's easy for them to see and plan towards. So as we start with our goals and we start to, sort of live with them, you may have an example of your own goal. We sometimes feel like we need a little bit of a boost, so even the best laid plans sometimes need a little bit of extra support. So that's why checking in with yourself regularly is so important. What is working for you and what isn't? So for example, walking every day sounds easy enough, but actually if you're planning on walking every day before work, you might find that come even now, October, November, December, walking in the morning isn't good. It's too dark, it's too cold, and actually you'd rather have that extra time in bed. So actually adjusting your plan. Do you walk at lunchtime so you get a bit of the daylight? And that's all right because it's about making it work for you, means that it's going to last for longer. You might find that the route feels too easy or it's a bit repetitive. So just making that small change means that you're actually more likely to just keep going for a little bit longer. And keeping it interesting, so inviting people to come with you, maybe inviting somebody who might bring a dog along and keep it different, because if we're wanting something to be sustainable, we want to remain interested. And I think the minute that we start to see it as quite boring and repetitive, we tend to start picking other things which are much more appealing.
For someone who might have set a goal but is struggling to meet that goal, what can they do to make it achievable?
Sometimes if we're struggling to meet the goals that we've set ourselves, it can mean that we need to adapt elements of that SMART goal. And that's why that checking in really regularly with ourselves is so important, because it might be that the goal isn't achievable and therefore it needs to be altered. So achievable will mean something different to everybody, but in the sort of sense of setting yourself a really unrealistic goal, nobody's going to win in that situation, because it's quite likely that you won't be able to meet it for any number of reasons, and it tends to knock our confidence. It can make us want to give up, make us go back to where we previously were. Whereas actually, if we set ourselves small and sustainable goals that we achieve, then we can take the next step up when we're ready. So these necessary sort of adaptations to things mean that we can keep going. So, you know, adapting to the weather, changing the time of day, making sure that somebody comes with you every now and then. All of these different things are going to make it that little bit more sustainable, and there's nothing wrong with being flexible, and it's actually what is going to keep things moving. So actually, if you find that it's really difficult to keep going, or you feel like you're hitting the same barrier, just go back to your goal and think, what is it that's making it difficult? What do I need to change? And just go from there and start again. There's absolutely no problem with that.
So I guess the $1 million question, you've started your new routine, you've done it a couple of times. So how can you make sure you don't just give up after 2 days? How can it become a long-term change that is part of your life?
One way of helping us to achieve our goals is to make our new behaviours into habits, which we can then do on a day-to-day basis. As humans, we are creatures of habit, but sometimes it can be quite difficult to know what that means. So habits are a behaviour that has been repeated enough times to become automatic. And habits are formed by this loop that we can see here. So a cue triggers a craving, which then motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies that craving and then becomes associated with the cue. And it sort of just loops round and round. And to form a habit, we need every single part of this loop to be in place. James Clear wrote an excellent book called Atomic Habits, which you may want to have a look at if you are interested in making some changes to your lifestyle. So he presented a framework which contains 4 laws which can allow us to create habits from our goals using that habit loop that you've just seen. So it's almost like cracking the code, because it means that if we can put a behaviour that we want to have as a habit, it means that we'll start to do it without realising, and it won't feel like so much effort, which means that we'll likely be able to keep going. So this framework and these 4 laws link really closely with that SMART goal framework, which we've spoken about. So it just highlights how helpful it can be to create SMART goals, as you're already that much further in terms of creating a habit from the behaviour, which means, like I said, it's going to be so much easier to do. So just thinking here, we've obviously got the 4 laws. If we think about my example that I'd mentioned previously, the first law is make it obvious. So if we're planning ahead and making a clear schedule of when, how and where we're going to do the habit, it will increase that likelihood of us carrying out the behaviour. So as I mentioned, sort of making it obvious. So we've got the very clear, every 3 weeks we increase the duration of the daily walk. That's, you know, couldn't be clearer. So that means that we can move on to the second law, which is making it attractive. So habits are attractive when we associate them with positive and enjoyable feelings. So combining habits with doing something that we enjoy, it will increase the experience to make it more positive and doable. So a walk on its own is okay, but you know, listening to music or a podcast, grabbing a coffee whilst you're on that route, all of these things make in our brain it feel that little bit more positive and enjoyable. So the third law, make it easy. So that just means that it doesn't require much energy to perform the habit, so making us more likely to do it. Now, some of you may feel that actually the physical activity itself is quite a lot of energy, but we mean more so getting to the point where we're ready to do it. So we almost call it priming the environment. So some people might find that keeping their walking shoes and their coat right by the front door and pre-planning the route means that they don't really have a reason not to, because it's very easy for them to do it. So that's sort of how we can make it easier, not the actual activity itself. Sometimes we do actually have to do that as well. And then the fourth law is make it satisfying. So we've got to get that good feeling at the end of it. So it needs to be enjoyable at the time, but also afterwards in order for us to want to do it again. So these benefits and that sort of positive feeling can be both mentally and physically. So we may find that whilst we're out, we've picked a route that we really enjoy. So it's scenic for me, not too hilly. But then afterwards, we might feel really calm and relaxed, or we might have had a really nice chat with a friend whilst we were out on the walk. And that's just going to reinforce that positive feeling of wanting to do it again. So using these 4 laws and our SMART goal combined, it means that eventually the behaviour or the goal that we had, it will become a habit, and it's something that we do naturally and it won't take so much energy. So it's much more sustainable and just becomes part of our daily routine. Other habits we might have is sitting on the same place on the sofa or always having a cup of tea first thing in the morning. If you think about how easy those things feel and how natural they feel, there's nothing to say that actually putting a realistic bit of activity into your day can reflect that as well. And there will be challenges, because there always is when we try to make lifestyle changes. But as I touched on at the start, there's going to be days where you feel fatigued, in pain, not wanting to leave the house. And that's okay, because we spoke about that self-kindness and that compassion towards ourselves. Take the time to care for yourself. And then the next day, you may feel that little bit better. Day after that, you might feel like you're actually ready to return to it because it's not a feeling of punishment. And I think, before, during, after cancer, it's really important to bear that in mind, because each day will be different, and it's just about sort of picking those times where you feel able and ready, and using this to support you means that you're going to be much more successful in implementing something that is important to you.
Thank you very much, Ellie. I have read Atomic Habits and I can highly recommend it. We'll include a link in the description. It's excellent as an audiobook, actually. It might be one of those books that you can listen to while you're out on a walk. So thank you for watching and for your time today. And if you found this video useful, please like it and subscribe for the latest health and wellbeing sessions. Leave your feedback in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on subjects you'd like us to bring you, as well as any questions that we can answer in future sessions. To find out more about the Thames Valley Cancer Alliance, please visit our website. Details of the website are in the description for the video. You can join our mailing list and we'll be able to send you details of live events that we're hoping to bring online in the future. You can also find details of how you can get involved with the work we do. Thank you again, and we really look forward to bringing you more of the information you want to see.